14-year-old girl then froze when he saw her dad. A black girl was just walking home. That's all. No noise, no trouble, just the quiet rhythm of her sneakers on the sidewalk and a backpack slung over one shoulder. Then the cruiser pulled up. Tires whispered against pavement. A white officer stepped out. No greeting, no reason. Just the question, where you headed? She stopped. Not because she was guilty, but because she'd been taught to survive. When she said her father was a special forces commander, he laughed sharp, public, cruel. People heard. Some laughed too. She didn't. She just stood there, 14, brown skin glowing under afternoon Sunday, carrying a truth bigger than any badge. And then, from down the street came a truck. No sirens, no shouting, just a man stepping out, calm, silent, dangerous in the way truth is. And everything was about to change. Stay with us. You won't forget what happens next. Zari walked the sidewalk like her father taught her, shoulders back, chin level, eyes ahead, even though everything in her wanted to curl up and disappear. She was 14, barely taller than the cruiser door beside her, but Officer Thomas looked at her like she was a grown threat. Where are you headed? He asked, stepping out. His badge caught the sun, but there was no warmth in his voice. Just heading home from robotics club, sir, she answered. Her voice was steady, but her pulse wasn't. No ID. No, sir. But I live 2 blocks away. My dad's. What does your dad do? She hesitated. Every instinct said, lie. Say he works construction. Say something easy. But her father always said, you never have to shrink to make others comfortable. So she told the truth. He was Army Special Forces, retired now. Thomas let out a laugh that wasn't casual, it was cruel. Right. And I'm James Bond. Zari blinked. The laugh cut deep. Not because it hurt, but because it said, you don't belong in your truth. She didn't flinch. Around them, a few teens slowed down. One boy chuckled. A girl pulled out her phone. You kids always say the wildest things, Thomas added. Why not just say your dad's the president next time? Zari stared at the ground, her hand gripping her cracked phone. It wasn't the first time someone didn't believe her, but this time it was loud, public, sharp. She thought about her dad's medals, not the ones on the wall, but the ones he never talked about. The scars under his sleeves, the steady way he walked into a room like he didn't need anyone's permission. And she stood taller. She didn't cry, didn't argue, just stood like silence was her armor. From across the street, a boy pressed record. Not because Zari made a scene, but because the truth was finally standing still long enough to be seen. Carter didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He stood still, eyes locked on the man before him, the officer who had laughed at his daughter, called her a liar in front of strangers, and made her question her own truth. Carter had taught himself, long ago, not to waste words on people who didn't listen. But this was different. Because he knew that face. Bryce Thomas, Carter said quietly. Fort Benning, Ramadi, summer of '04, Fire Team Charlie, and Rip. Thomas blinked, his mouth parted. Master Sergeant Carter. Carter didn't nod. I dragged you out of that alley with a bullet in your leg and 2 in the wall behind your head. I taught you how to clear a room, hold your line, and never question a soldier's honor without proof. Thomas looked away. The badge on his chest suddenly felt like a burden, not a shield. Carter turned slightly, just enough to glance at Zari, his daughter, his blood standing off to the side, silent, proud, wounded in ways Thomas would never understand, and that's when Carter felt it. Not rage, not shame, but something heavier. Disappointment. You could have asked her name, he said, voice low. You could have walked her home, but you didn't. You saw a brown girl walking alone, and you chose to make her small. Thomas's lips moved, but no words came out. I didn't raise my daughter to lie, Carter continued. She carries my legacy, not with medals, but with dignity. And today, you spat on that. The silence around them grew dense, electric. Someone across the street was filming. Carter didn't care. He hadn't come to make a scene. He came because his child had stood alone when the truth should have been enough. He stepped forward, just just once. You used to salute me. Today, you disrespected the only thing I've ever fought to protect. Then he turned to Zari. Let's go. And with that, Carter walked away not because the moment was over, but because his presence had already spoken the truth louder than any punishment could. Carter stepped out of the truck like silence had taken human form. No uniform, no medals, just boots, jeans, and eyes that had seen too much. He moved slowly, not because he was old, but because he never needed to rush. Zari's shoulders dropped. Relief. Dad, she whispered. Carter scanned her first. No bruises. Just the kind of ache a father knew. Invisible, but real. You hurt? No, sir. Then he turned. Eyes locked on the officer who'd mocked his daughter. Name? Thomas straightened. Officer Bryce Thomas. Carter tilted his head. Ramadi. July '04. 3rd Squad. You were there. Thomas froze. The memory hit like a punch to the ribs. I was, he said quietly. You're Master Sergeant Carter. Carter nodded once. I remember you. Thomas swallowed hard. So do I. He didn't say it aloud, but he remembered. Carter, standing in the mess tent while 2 senior officers made jokes about his accent and skin. Carter, staying silent. Carter, the same man who carried Thomas out after the ambush when no one else could move. You shouldn't be here, Thomas finally said, almost to himself. Carter raised an eyebrow. Why? Because you'd have to face what you forgot. Then a voice from behind. I remember him too. They turned. A man stepped from the alley. Thin, gray-bearded, worn by the street. But his posture said, Soldier, I was with him in Najaf. You don't forget the guy who stitched you up with duct tape and kept you laughing till evac came. People around the block began to slow. A woman stopped her stroller. A kid dropped his soda. Phones came up, but no one spoke. I served with Carter, the veteran said. Your girl's telling the truth. That man's a damn legend. He's a pie. Thomas's face collapsed. All the years, all the pride, all the ignorance, it came down like glass in heat. And Carter, he didn't gloat. He didn't scold. He just said, You saw me mocked, and I still pulled you from the fire. Today, you mocked my daughter, but I'm not here for revenge. He looked at Zari. I'm here to show her that silence held right can outlast every lie in this world. Thomas stood frozen. Carter's voice hadn't risen, but it had cracked something open. Ramadi. July '04. The memories hit like a sandstorm. He remembered Carter then calm under fire, shouting orders over mortar blasts. But more than that, he remembered something smaller, quieter, a moment in the mess hall. 2 officers laughing behind Carter's back, calling him Desert Sergeant and questioning if a black man with a name like his had any business giving orders. Thomas hadn't joined in, but he hadn't spoken up either. He had kept eating. He had swallowed his shame then, just like he was doing now. Looking at Carter now, Thomas didn't just see the man who saved his life. He saw the moral standard he had betrayed, twice. Once, by staying silent. Now, by mocking Carter's daughter in public with the same kind of cruelty he once pretended not to hear. Thomas's mouth went dry. His badge suddenly felt welded to his chest, heavy, undeserved. I knew she was telling the truth, he muttered, barely audible. But I made her a target anyway, because she reminded me of what I'll never be. Carter didn't blink. Thomas's voice cracked. You carried honor through war. I couldn't even carry it through a conversation with a child. There, around them, the world moved slower. A stroller creaked. A dog barked somewhere. But everything felt like it had stopped. I didn't just doubt her, Thomas whispered. I erased her because I forgot you, and everything you taught us. Carter didn't raise a hand, didn't shake his head. That silence was worse than fury. It was memory, judgment, truth. Thomas looked at Zari, shoulders back, chin high, pain tucked neatly under dignity. He realized the war he thought he'd left behind had never ended. It had simply changed uniforms. And this time, he had become the thing Carter once protected him from. Thomas stood as if someone had cut the air around him. The laughter, the casual mockery from earlier, it now felt like poison in his mouth. Carter didn't raise his voice. He didn't walk forward. He didn't even look angry. He just stood beside his daughter, calm, composed, devastating. She told the truth, Carter said softly, like he was reading a line from a funeral. Then came the question, why wasn't that enough? Thomas blinked. It was a simple question, but it hit with the force of a battlefield. His mind raced backward to Ramadi, the sweltering desert, Carter yelling orders over radio static. He remembered Carter covering the rear while Thomas froze in fear. Carter had risked his life to pull him out. Carter, who never demanded thanks, who never needed anyone to believe him to be exactly who he said he was. Thomas had stayed silent when Carter was mocked by their own unit for his accent, for the way he didn't look like a commander. Now, 2 decades later, he had done the same to Carter's daughter. Disbelief, sarcasm. He hadn't just doubted her, he had made her feel invisible. Carter looked at him, not with hate, but with something worse. Disappointment. You didn't ask for proof when I saved you. You didn't ask who I was before I carried you out. Thomas's chest tightened. I forgot, he whispered. Carter nodded once. Truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to be heard. Then he turned to Zari. You did good, sweetheart. Thomas couldn't speak, couldn't move. He just stood there, badge gleaming useless on his chest, as father and daughter walked away. And that question, the one that would echo long after. She told the truth. Why wasn't that enough? It wasn't for Thomas alone. It was for everyone who ever saw truth and still chose silence. Ethan wasn't trying to be a hero that afternoon. He was just a 16-year-old kid hanging out near the school parking lot shooting B-roll footage for his film class. His camera was always with him, an old Sony with a cracked viewfinder, but it still worked, and that was enough. When he saw Zari standing stiff near the police cruiser, her face tense, her voice quiet but unshaken, something in him told him to hit record. He didn't know her well, just that she was quiet, smart, always left class a few minutes early for some family reason nobody asked about. He zoomed in instinctively, capturing not just the confrontation, but the strange stillness in Zari's posture, the disrespect dripping from Officer Thomas's voice, and the way the laughter of the crowd cut sharp through her silence. Then Carter arrived. No sirens, no yelling, just gravity. Ethan kept filming, even when his hands trembled. He caught the exact moment Thomas recognized the man he mocked. He saw the flicker of shame in a grown man's eyes, and he caught Zari still, composed, quietly heroic. That night, Ethan uploaded the clip to his small YouTube channel. He titled it simply, Silence Doesn't Mean a Lie, No Clickbait, No Music. Just raw footage and a single pinned comment. Sometimes, the strongest voice is the one that refuses to shout. By morning, it had 2.3 million views. Some called it powerful. Others said it was staged. But no one could look away. News anchors quoted the title. Veterans shared it with tears. Teachers played it in classrooms. Ethan didn't do interviews. He just let the footage speak. When a local arts foundation offered him a scholarship to study documentary filmmaking, he hesitated. Then he remembered Zari's face, not angry, not afraid, just steady. He accepted. Because Ethan learned something that day. Sometimes the lens doesn't just record truth. It protects it. And the quietest moments are often the ones that echo longest. By the second morning, Ethan's video had reached over 6 million views. It was no longer just a clip. It had become a mirror. Talk shows debated it, church groups discussed it, and war veterans shared it with captions like, This is what service looks like. A still image of Zari, chin lifted. Eyes unwavering became an icon of quiet strength. The world listened, but not everyone heard the same thing. Some viewers were deeply moved. Teachers played the video in classrooms, using it to spark conversations about truth and bias. Parents wrote heartfelt comments. This could have been my daughter. Others, especially from military families, praised Carter's calm and saw in him the discipline of a man who had lived through battles both on and off the field. But not all reactions were kind. A wave of skepticism surged online. Influencers questioned the timing, the angles, the silence. One podcast host sneered, "Feels too cinematic to be real. Kid probably planned it for views." Trolls flooded Ethan's channel with comments like, "Fake story, fake drama," and another anti-cop sob piece. His inbox was a war zone, some thanking him for speaking truth, others accusing him of smearing a good officer's name. A segment aired on local news. Viral or manipulated. Analysts dissected Ethan's camera work. Was it too steady for a teenager? Why no audio from Carter? Was the silence edited? No one knew for sure. And yet, people couldn't look away. Meanwhile, Zari walked through school halls like nothing had happened. She didn't speak to reporters. She didn't post a reaction. Her silence, again, said more than words. In a post that gained traction, a retired Marine wrote, "You know what's real? The look on that man's face. That wasn't acting. That was history." The debate raged on, but the truth remained unchanged. The clip had torn open something deeper than opinions it had exposed, where people stood when silence demanded a side. And perhaps that's what scared them most. Zari didn't chase the spotlight. While reporters camped outside her school and social media exploded with her name, she stayed silent. No statements. No interviews. Just one quiet act. 3 days after the video went viral, Zari posted a photo. It wasn't high quality, just a still frame from Ethan's footage. She and her father, Carter, stood side by side. Zari's expression was calm but unreadable. No tears, no bravado. But what spoke loudest was his hand, strong, weathered, steady, resting on her shoulder. That was it. No filter, no caption. And somehow, that image echoed louder than any headline. Within hours, veterans across the country shared it. "That's what it means to have someone six," one Marine wrote. A retired Army medic tweeted, "I've seen that hand before on the battlefield, holding someone steady after a blast." A woman in Florida, the widow of a fallen soldier, commented, "My husband didn't get to raise our daughter, but if he had, I hope he'd have stood just like that." Church groups printed the photo for Sunday reflection. A small diner in Iowa hung it next to their wall of heroes. It became a quiet emblem, not of protest, not of rage, but of grounded strength, of dignity. News anchors scrambled to cover the viral silence. But the real story wasn't noise, it was resonance. It was what people felt but couldn't say. The photo reminded them of the fathers who came home changed, the mothers who waited by the phone, the children who grew up learning what sacrifice really meant. Zari didn't need to say a word. That single moment told a whole story for every soldier who fought, every family who waited, and every person who ever stood alone and wished someone had placed a hand on their shoulder and said, "I believe you." It's not tangible. The image didn't scream. It didn't argue. It simply stood still and invited the world to be still with it. And in that stillness, millions felt seen, because sometimes the quietest photos carry the loudest truths. It was a quiet afternoon in the library when Mina finally spoke. She and Zari had been paired for a history project, something about resilience through war. But the real story surfaced between whispered conversations and scattered notes. "My mom," Mina said softly, eyes down on her notebook, "was a combat medic in Iraq." Zari looked up, surprised. Mina was always calm, thoughtful, the kind of girl who didn't speak unless it mattered. "She saved lives," Mina continued. "Dragged men twice her size out of burning convoys. Stayed awake 72 hours during Fallujah's worst week. She never talks about it. Not because she forgot, because no one ever asked." Zari didn't say anything. She just listened. "She came home without a single medal. No parade, just paperwork and pain," Mina added, her voice tight but steady. "And still, every Memorial Day, she irons her scrubs, places flowers at the VA hospital, and thanks the men she once kept breathing." Zari blinked back, something sharp behind her eyes. "She saw your video," Mina said quietly, "the one Ethan filmed." And she cried. "Why?" Zari asked, stunned. "Because she knows what it's like to be invisible after doing the impossible." That sentence hung between them like a thread made of iron. Later that week, Mina invited Zari home. Her mother, a woman with soft eyes and firm posture, welcomed her in silence. After dinner, she led them to the hallway, where an old shadow box hung, dog tags, faded photos, a folded American flag. No medals. Standing there, Mina's mother gently placed a hand on Zari's shoulder. You don't need a ribbon to know you were brave, she said. You just need to remember. That moment, that touch, said more than any award could. Zari nodded, quietly absorbing what it meant. That sometimes the strongest people wear no badges, no uniforms. They just carry the weight and keep walking. In that small, candle-lit hallway, surrounded by forgotten honors and quiet courage, Zari learned another truth. Heroes don't always stand in front of cameras. Sometimes they sit across the table, pass the bread, and go unnoticed. But their stories live on in the daughters they raise, and in the shoulders they steady. The sun was gentle that morning, soft and golden over the hills where silence stood in formation. Mina's mother didn't say much at first. She simply asked, "Come with us today." Zari agreed, curious. She didn't expect it to change something inside her. The military cemetery sprawled endlessly neat white headstones, small flags fluttering beside some, and a hush that no one dared to break. Mina walked ahead, close to her mother. Zari followed behind, unsure, until they stopped. Mina's mother, a woman whose quiet strength felt heavier than steel, rested her hand on one stone and whispered. He was 22, held my wrist and begged, "Please, ma'am, don't let me die. My mama's still alive. I have 2 kids." They moved on. Another stone, another story. One soldier, his arm shattered, barely conscious, said, "Doc, if you have to take the arm, take it. Don't waste time on me if others still got a shot. I need." Zari listened. No photos, no medals, just voices in the wind. A few rows later, Mina's mother paused again. This boy lost both legs in an IED blast. He told me, "I promised my girl I'd come home whole. I can't face her like this." She swallowed, but her voice didn't shake. I told him, "She won't love you less. She'll love you more. Because you came back, even broken. That takes more than strength. That takes honor." Zari felt the tears come silent, sudden. Not from sadness alone, but from the weight of what people carry without applause. Mina's mother knelt, laid down 3 white roses. "Not everyone gets a parade," she said. "Some of us just remember. That's enough." Then she looked at Zari, her hand warm on the girl's shoulder. "You don't need the world to know, but you need to remember." Zari nodded. No words. Just the sound of flags rustling and a quiet sense that something sacred had just been handed to her. Some truths aren't shouted. They're passed down shoulder to shoulder, heart to heart. And from that day forward, Zari carried them. The classroom felt like any other Tuesday, but the air was different, charged with something unsaid. Mr. Lawson had just finished talking about memorials and recognition when he casually asked, "Anyone here have family who served?" A pause. Then, quietly, a girl named Eliza stood. Her voice didn't waver. It didn't need to. "My mom was a nurse with the 86th Combat Support Hospital," she said. 2 tours, Mosul and Kandahar. She never got a ceremony, not even a welcome home banner. The class went still. She told me once about a young soldier who'd been hit by shrapnel. He kept asking, "Is my leg still there?" Over and over. She lied, said yes, said it looked fine, but it was already gone. No one blinked. She said, "Another man burns over half his body," grabbed her wrist and whispered, "Don't let me die ugly. My little girl's waiting at home. She thinks I look like Superman." Eliza swallowed. "He didn't make it." Still silence. "My mom never cried about it," she added, "but I saw the way she folds his photo back into the drawer every time, like folding a flag, quiet, precise, sacred." Zari's chest tightened. Mina reached over, placed a hand on hers. Then Eliza's voice shifted, just slightly. One soldier she worked on was only 19. As he was fading out, he said, "Tell my mom I was brave. My mom didn't know his name. She just wrote it on her glove, so she wouldn't forget." No one dared break the silence. That's why she still doesn't go to 4th of July barbecues, Eliza finished. Too many fireworks, too many ghosts. Mr. Lawson didn't speak. No one clapped, but something changed. The students sat straighter, not out of discipline, out of reverence, because in that moment they understood. Not all heroes come home in uniforms. Some come home in pieces, some come home and never say a word, and sometimes it takes the courage of a child to make the silence finally speak. Ethan didn't dress for attention that day. A wrinkled button down, shoes a little too big, and the same camera bag he always carried slung over one shoulder. The community center was packed, but quiet, not the kind of silence that feels empty, the kind that feels sacred. He wasn't used to microphones or spotlights. When they called his name, he stepped forward slowly, like someone not quite sure they belonged in the center of anything. He cleared his throat, eyes flicking to the back row where his mom sat gripping the edge of her seat, pride hidden behind tears. I didn't plan to film anything that day, Ethan began, voice steady but soft. I wasn't chasing a headline. I just saw something that needed to be seen. He paused. The memory shot behind his eyes. A girl stood tall while a man in uniform laughed at her. She didn't shout, she didn't flinch, but something about her silence, it shook me. A few heads nodded quietly, and then her father came. He didn't raise his voice either. He just stood there, and somehow the whole street got quiet. Ethan glanced down at his hands. I think we're used to thinking power looks like noise. That truth needs a megaphone, but it doesn't. Sometimes truth walks in without asking for permission. He looked up, locking eyes with an older man in the front row. His navy cap faded, his chest rising slow. That's what I learned. Truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs light. That day, my camera was the light. No standing ovation, just stillness, the kind that says everyone in the room had been waiting to hear exactly that, even if they didn't know it. After the ceremony, a quiet man with trembling hands stopped Ethan near the door. He said nothing at first, then offered only this. My brother, he served. We never had footage, but I wish we did. Ethan nodded, understanding more than words could say. He didn't feel like a filmmaker. He felt like a witness, and that was enough. The dust at Fort Benning never really settled. It hung in the Georgia air like a dare clinging to skin, boots, breath. The sun hadn't even risen fully when the young recruits were already running drills, sweat bleeding through fatigues. Master Sergeant Carter didn't shout unless it mattered, and when he did, the ground seemed to listen. Thomas, you drag your foot one more time, and you'll be crawling back to civilian life with it. Private Bryce Thomas, just 21, tried to straighten under the weight of exhaustion. His chest burned, his legs wobbled, but there was something in Carter's voice, a steadiness that dared you not to quit. Later that week, during a live fire simulation gone wrong, a sandbagged wall gave way and sent debris flying. Thomas froze. So did most of the squad. But Carter didn't. He moved without hesitation, shielding Thomas with his own body, dragging him out while rounds snapped too close. Thomas never forgot that. He never forgot the weight of Carter's arm pulling him to safety, or the calm in Carter's voice as chaos screamed around them. Breathe, soldier. You're not dying today. In the hospital later, Thomas asked him why. You didn't even like me, he said weakly. Carter looked at him, one brow raised. I'm not here to like you. I'm here to teach you what it means to carry others. That includes you. Thomas nodded, unable to speak. That moment etched itself into him, deeper than any scar. But memories fade. Life moves. Rank builds walls, and people forget the hands that lifted them. Until years later, a girl, standing tall under judgment, a father, arriving in silence, and a man older, now, in a badge instead of boots, suddenly recognizing the figure from the dust, from the blast, from the moment that defined his life. It was him. It had always been him, and Thomas would remember too late that you don't stop being a soldier when the war ends. You carry the lessons or you dishonor them. And Carter, he never stopped carrying. They had to ask twice before Zari agreed to the interview. She didn't like cameras, didn't like the noise that came with attention. But something in her eyes told the reporter this wasn't a shy girl, this was a steady one. The room was quiet. No stage lights, no studio audience. Just a simple chair, a glass of water, and a teenager who had been through more in 2 weeks than most adults faced in years. "So, Zari," the reporter asked gently, "with everything that happened, your video going viral, the support, the criticism, do you want to say anything?" Zari looked down at her hands, fingers loosely intertwined. She was wearing a plain sweater, no makeup, no attempt to be anything but herself. She thought for a moment, then raised her eyes. "My dad once told me," she said softly, "the truth doesn't need applause. It just needs someone to carry it." And that was it. No tears, no dramatic music, just that sentence, quiet, clear, immovable. The clip was only 12 seconds long, but in those 12 seconds, people cried. Combat veterans wrote in the comments, "Reminds me of my daughter." A woman in Georgia shared it with a caption, "My husband never wanted a medal. He just wanted people to come home." The video aired on local news, then national, not because Zari performed, but because she didn't, because the stillness in her voice spoke louder than outrage ever could. Afterward, the interviewer said she'd never seen a child speak like that. She didn't sound like a girl defending her father, she said. She sounded like someone defending a principle. Zari didn't give any more interviews. She went back to school, ate lunch with Mina, helped Ethan plan his next documentary. But that line, her father's words, lived on. People printed it on posters. Teachers wrote it in classrooms. One Vietnam vet had it engraved on his cane. Because truth, real truth, isn't loud. It's carried quietly, with spine, by people like Zari. The badge was left on the captain's desk at dawn. No announcement, no ceremony, just a quiet envelope and 2 folded letters. Bryce Thomas didn't wait for permission. He knew the weight of what he'd done. Knew that no policy could justify the moment he made a 4-year-old girl feel small for speaking the truth. The first letter was addressed to the department. Simple, unapologetic. "I forgot what the badge meant. I forgot who taught me how to wear it. He taught me that real authority is silent, never loud. And that when you forget to listen, you fail not just the job, but the people." The second was written by hand. The pen pressed too deep in some places, as if each word was trying to carve its way out of guilt. "To Zari and Mr. Carter, I thought I was the one enforcing order, but you reminded me of what it means to carry dignity. I failed twice. First, when I laughed at truth, and again, when I forgot who taught me how to recognize it. Sergeant Carter, you led men through war with less noise than I made trying to control a child. And Zari, you didn't flinch, even when I did everything to make you doubt yourself. That's strength. That's leadership. I hope to earn back what I forgot, one small step at a time. No badge, no shield, just the man I still want to become." Signed, simply, B. Thomas. The letters made their way to Carter's home in a plain white envelope. He read them once, in silence, standing near his front porch. Then he placed them inside a box next to an old campaign ribbon he never wore. He didn't need to say anything, but Zari did. She folded the note into the back of her journal. No anger, just understanding. Because forgiveness isn't always loud, and sometimes the most powerful redemption doesn't come with applause, it comes with stillness. Weeks later, buried quietly in Thomas's personnel file, someone found a final typed line. No signature, no timestamp. Honor isn't granted, it's reclaimed. Zari found the note not on her pillow, not taped to a screen, but quietly folded inside the back cover of her school binder. Her father had slipped it in without a word, as he always did. No spotlight, no fanfare, just presence. The paper was old military stationery, creased but clean. His handwriting was sharp, steady, not a smudge. It read, "Truth doesn't need applause. It only needs you to carry it." Zari held it for a long time. In the quiet of her room, the weight of that one sentence filled the air heavier than any speech. Her father had stood before a mocking officer without rage. He'd faced down injustice not with fists, but with presence. And now, through this note, he was teaching her something far more lasting than defiance. He was teaching her how to carry truth with dignity. She remembered that day, the sun glaring off the cruiser, the smirks, the silence, but also the moment it shifted, when Carter arrived and said almost nothing, yet everything changed. That was the lesson, that truth doesn't demand the stage. It simply stands, and if it's carried well, even in silence, it speaks louder than any microphone ever could. Zari pressed the note flat, slid it into a small side pocket of her backpack, not to show, but to keep, not for display, for anchoring, for remembering. And as she zipped it closed, something inside her settled too. She would not chase applause. She would walk with the truth quietly, firmly, like he had, and that would always be enough. They didn't walk like kids anymore. Zari, Mina, and Ethan moved down the sun-washed street as if time itself had slowed to let them pass. Not a single word spoken, yet everything was being said. The wind carried a quiet weight, like memory. Zari held her father's folded note in her pocket, the one he left on her desk that morning. Truth doesn't need applause, just someone strong enough to carry it. Her fingers gripped it now, not for comfort, but for strength. Beside her, Mina's eyes glistened. She wore her mother's old medical dog tag around her neck, letting it rest near her heartbeat. Ethan had his camera bag zipped shut, not filming this moment. Some things, he'd come to learn, you don't record, you live. As they neared the edge of the Veterans Memorial Park, the wind lifted a flag nearby. It snapped once, then fell still. Zari paused, looked up. A man in a wheelchair watched from across the lawn. A former soldier, one leg missing, saluted them quietly. No words, no recognition, just knowing. They returned the gesture with a simple nod. No spotlight, no drama, just respect passed in silence. And then they kept walking. Three kids, now carrying stories that didn't belong to just them anymore. As their shadows stretched behind them, the final words rose, not shouted, not staged, but felt. You don't need to shout to be heard. Just stand tall. The rest, the world will silence itself to listen. And it did. What if silence wasn't weakness, but strength unshaken? Zari didn't raise her voice. She didn't fight with fists or fury. She just stood tall, telling the truth when no one believed her. And in doing so, she held up a mirror to all of us, asking, why isn't honesty enough? Her story isn't rare. That's what makes it so urgent. Behind every uniform is a name that history forgets. A nurse who stitched wounds no one saw. A soldier who never made it home. A child who carries the weight of silence because speaking up costs too much. But Zari spoke anyway, quietly, firmly, fully. And that changed everything. She didn't just reclaim her voice. She gave voice to the invisible, the caregivers, the healers, the protectors who never asked for applause. She reminded us, dignity isn't something you wear. It's how you walk, how you wait, how you tell the truth even when laughter rises against you. So now, we turn to you. Who in your life has stood tall when it mattered most? Who told the truth when it was easier to stay silent? Comment below. Say their name. Let this space be their monument. If this story moved you, share it. Let it ripple. Let someone else find strength in it. And if you haven't yet subscribed to our channel, not for numbers, but for meaning, because we will keep telling the stories that others bury. Stories like Zari's, stories like yours. Thank you for staying with us until the very last second. Now, carry the truth forward. It's listening time. It's remembering time. It's your turn to stand tall.